の大事なものが奪われたんだくすれてんだ胸が燃えている What is up, J-pop fans? This isn't anything artist-specific, but I will be talking about J-rock, how to arrange rock parts, how to set your guitar tones, effects, mixing, and whatnot. And I'm gonna be doing it with my new song, which is on the description. So, yeah, let's get on to it. So you've seen me probably use my Stratocaster guitar, which is the only electric guitar that I have for now. And so I'm gonna be centering the tones and our approach based on the single coil pickups. Now I know you should be using Telecasters or Les Pauls, but I'm broke, so let's make this work. So in J-rock and a lot of what I do, I usually have a version of the chorus on as the intro, like literally just the chorus with the lead guitar. But for this, I just started with some basic riffs. So this is the main riff that I'm doing. So right off the bat, you can hear the background noise, which is due to my very terrible audio interface. Because I have a lot of amp noise that I don't want to remove with anti-noise tools, I'd rather just add vinyl noise to make it seem like I'm legitimizing my sound choices. So in this method, I leaned onto the noise and made it an aesthetic choice rather than due to bad gear. And a few more other noise samples, and of course the drums with the ride cymbal. You've probably seen me use that drum plugin a lot. I mean, it does sound good, like the snare is really well recorded, and so I'm sticking with that, and I'm just adding a bunch of analog compressors just to make it pop off in the mix. And then I'm changing up the composition a bit rather than just riffs. I added the chords on the other side, so I'm panning them left and right. So for the guitar tone, I'm not much of an expert at this at all, but what I do know is that I prefer not using distortion pedals, and I much prefer using the natural crunch of whatever amp model I'm using. So I'm using a Miniplex amp, and I'm just setting the settings to mid gain, so like just a bit of crunch but not too much of that wailing distortion sound. And here are my settings, and I love using compressors rather than cranking up the gain, so it sounds a bit like this. The other side is the same preset, I just tweaked a bit of it. And yeah, just default amps and cabinets from whatever Amplitude has. And I'm using this pickup position on my Strat. So the left and right channel, I'm bussing them together, adding a bunch of compressors. I added OTT. I'm not sure if it actually helps. So I added sculpting EQ, I added dynamic EQ. I also added a bunch of mid-side stuff, just to clean it up a bit. And then I'm adding this compressor from Analog Obsession, which kinda gives it more power and some crunch, and then some gain. So for the verse, I'm setting the chords on the other side, and then the riff on the other side of the panning, rather than the chorus double-tracked, and then the lead is on the middle, just to give it a bit more space before everything starts becoming wide in the chorus. As you know, piano is also very common in J-rock. We're just gonna add some piano as ostinatos or just fillers, and I made it super dry. So for the bass, I'm just picking some random bass model I found on Modobase and added a bit of compression. And the way that I do bass amps is that I don't use anything built in with the plugin. I use Amplitude. They have really nice like bass amps, and so yeah. So I added one of these things which I also used on my previous song. So those are just a bunch of palm-muted guitar stuff that help the drum section be a lot more lively. And then I added more background crunch. This is the same preset for the guitar, but then I added more gain, hence the noise. And yeah, it goes onto the chorus. And one thing that I do want to share with the arrangement as well is that a lot of the elements, like the number of elements in the pre-chorus and chorus, is the same thing. I'm just manipulating the musical parts and maybe occasionally the volume or some effects. I get that consistency, but I still get the rising of energy that I get from the pre-chorus and the chorus. So for the chorus guitars, the only thing changed is the strumming pattern. It's just full on strums, and it's the same bus, same preset, same EQs and everything. And then the bass is also still the same, but what is different is my lead guitar part. So when I was mixing this, I was debating whether I should use Ozone Imager or just doubling the lead, but I realized that you can get a kind of stereo sound by just using another amp that is kind of like a similar sound, and then just routing their mics left and right to make sure that you're still getting the same sample, but then it sounds kind of different on both ears. And then for the palm muted guitar, I just added a new sequence, and then a new pattern as well for the drums. In terms of instrumentation and arrangement, that's all the elements that I have. And so let's move on to music theory and chords. So for the main pattern, this is the chord progression. I also have another pattern that's another chord progression that's sort of descending. So this entire chord progression is a variation on the Royal Road chord progression, but I added a bunch of changes over here in the second repetition just so I can have a bit of a narrative going on which repeats the same phrase. But over here in this part, before the instrumental kicks in, I added a bunch of borrowed chords that sort of give you a feeling of modulation, but you end up just staying in the same key anyway. So this is what it sounds like. And of course, in this part where the lead is present, I changed the strumming pattern to something more forward. One thing that I always do in my tracks and in my arrangements is I have a section wherein I break the flow of the arrangement and add a part where it all turns into unison and then just does a certain kind of rhythm with passing chord change like this. I'm making it obvious for the audience that I want them to notice this chord change right here, and that I also point everything like harmonic and melodic towards this chord change. So a lot of the stuff like the lead, I changed them up to complement the chord change, to make the chord change really sell and make it a part of the ear candy. So I do this by changing up the lead or adding an instrumental or changing up the bass, just so I can really sell the chord, the passing chord change. And it works really well for this song, because it heads on to a new section, which is the one with the lead. And of course, going back to masking and making your recordings blend in. So of course, when solo, this lead part absolutely sounds kind of terrible, but then if you add everything in, it kind of masks itself. Especially with the compressors and everything acting on the main bus. One thing that I always love to experiment with is changing up velocity to make certain timbres different over time. Like for example, this piano part. So the second verse isn't really too different. I just added a bunch of filler stuff just to make it feel less boring. And then I added this section with a different riff and progression. One thing as well that you can do is applying like breather sections, like this bar for example. It's basically just an extended chord strum. This gives you time to sort of react to the next impact, which is the next chorus. So it sounds like this. I also love to play around with pitch, rhythm, panning, and stuff when it's like the last beat before the chorus. So the synth, for example, it basically just goes really high and then tails into reverb, which I think serves the same purpose as having like reverse white noise in EDM music. Going back to legitimizing your chord changes, you can of course add some more elements, stuff like the synth, for example. And then the second chorus, which is mostly the same in the first part, but then before it hits the synth solo, I added this section. One thing as well that I learned from J-pop is that you can extend your sequences by one bar or one measure if you feel like it, even though it kind of feels lopsided because the way that we usually count stuff is by powers of 2. So when you have a sequence that is 4 bars, it makes sense to loop it twice, which is now 8 bars. But it feels weird to extend it by 1 because it kind of feels lopsided. So we head on to the next division, which is going to be 16 bars. But in this arrangement, I wanted to do a cliche, like something that I heard from a song a while ago, which is that you can extend your last 2 bars by another 2 bars. This then becomes 18 bars as a section, which is the one before the solo. And the way that you can justify this 2 bars here is by just using your musical sense, like for example in this chord change. This is the previous borrowed chord example from before, but this time I added a different chord progression. Together it sounds like this. So if we leave the 16 bars alone without the 2 extra bars, it would sound like this. Because we changed the chord narrative, it now then makes sense, and it even enhances the arrangement this way and makes the solo even more rewarding. So for the bridge, it's the same elements but a new arrangement again. One thing that I want to point out as well is this palm mute thing. It gives like personality to the section a lot. It's kind of like a fake out. So for the third chorus, you've seen me do this thing a lot, which is just saving 2 bars of just like calmness and then just making everything impact on the third bar, just like this. I'm also adding this unison part for impact. So for the lead, I'm just doing this kind of thing. It just sounds nice. And then we go back to the original pattern. And then everything's the same here. And for the ending, I'm recalling the original riff here with this kind of weird synth. And then a sound effect together. And so that's my J-Rock track. Let's do a little recap before we end. I just basically added a bunch of guitars, layered in some bass, some drums, added some elements to decorate it and make it unique, focused on arrangement cliches and impact, stuff like that, and of course just have the right chords. The other tracks here are just my vocals, and yeah, you can see all the elements that I've used, which isn't a lot actually. So yeah, this song is available in all the platforms. I'm also posting a Vocaloid version and my vocals with the lyrics on another video. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Stream it.